This afternoon, I got a text from his secretary. "Madam, Mr. Charles has a dinner tonight and will be home around 10:30. I stared at my phone briefly and replied, "Okay, thanks. 10:30. He would have eaten by then. I just had to prepare the bath and his clothes. I finished everything by 9:45 and went to bed. I heard the door open and the water running in the bathroom. He came to bed and kissed me.
Why are you sleeping so early?
He whispered in my ear. "A little tired," I said, not pushing him away. We made love, and he fell asleep. I couldn't sleep. I got up and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in the living room and saw our wedding photos on the wall. When should I tell him I want a divorce? Charles and I met in college. He was the campus star, wealthy, intelligent, handsome, perfect. I fell in love with him naturally. I chased him for 2 semesters and did many silly things, but he never noticed me. I remember it was a snowy day. I knitted a scarf for him and waited for him outside his dorm. But he said to me coldly, "Dagny, leave me alone. I have someone I love." I didn't believe him at first. I thought it was just an excuse, until I saw her, Betty. I saw him take off his coat and wrap it around her. I saw him comfort her softly as she cried. I saw him kiss her gently on the lips. He was so tender to her, so hurt by her, but not to me. Their love story spread quickly. He was the proud son of heaven. She was the poor student. She faced a lot of criticism and gossip. He even banned the school forum to protect her. But their love didn't last. They broke up because Charles wanted to marry her after graduation, but Betty refused. She said she wanted to be independent, not rely on a man. They fought and made up and fought again until Betty decided to return to her hometown and work as a teacher. They parted ways for good. Half a year later, Charles and my family had a project together. Charles and I met again. We got closer because of the project. I was still nice to him as before. I reminded him to drink less when he socialized. I cooked soup for him and brought it to his office. 3 months later, he saw me shivering outside his company one snowy night. He came over and asked me,
Dagny, do you still like me that much?
I looked at him blankly and nodded. Yes, I always liked him. He smiled.
So, do you want to marry me?
I loved him from the day we married and for most of the past 5 years. I thought he loved me too, even though he rarely contacted me, kept his schedule secret and only shared a routine bed with me. I never bothered him with my problems, even when I was sick and went to the hospital alone. But then I found a box with letters from a rural school principal, thanking him for his anonymous donations for years. The principal's name was Betty. I was making breakfast the following day when Charles hugged me from behind. Surprised, I asked him, "Are you having breakfast at home today?" He nodded, and I gave him the fried omelette I had made. He looked at it and hesitated. "It's hot. Devour it. I must do my makeup. I'm going with Grandma to see Mrs. Tang." I put down the milk and turned to leave.
Honey.
He pulled me back and wanted to say something. I looked at him curiously. "What's wrong?" He embraced me and asked,
Have you been tired lately?
"Tired? Yes, I'm exhausted. I am tired of thinking about how to divorce him."
I'm free tonight. Do you want to go to the new Michelin restaurant near the office? They have the Cantonese food you love.
He said. I was shocked and he asked,
Are you free tonight?
"How long?" He smiled and touched my earlobe.
A lot.
"A lot?" I was happy. "Really?" He smiled.
Of course.
"Great, I'll meet you at the office tonight then." I jumped off him, feeling much lighter. It was great that he was free. That meant that tonight, we could finally talk about the divorce. Charles didn't show up that night. He broke his promise. I was about to leave at 5 p.m. when I got a text from the secretary. Charles had an urgent meeting and couldn't dine with me. This had happened many times in 5 years, and I was used to it, so I changed my clothes and ate alone. After dinner, I sat by the window watching the sky turn dark and browsed some videos on my phone. Then I saw Charles in a popular video. He was with someone else. It was Betty. They sat across each other with Charles's company cafe behind them. The blogger, who seemed to work for Charles, said excitedly in the video,
"Look at our company's benefits. We can see Big Boss and the famous Principal Betty having coffee after work, and Principal Betty is even prettier than on TV. I want to ask for her autograph."
The video was posted 5 minutes ago. The comments were full of compliments. "What a handsome boss and a beautiful teacher, so eye-catching, so jealous of the blogger. Is your company hiring? I want to join too. I watched silently for a long time and turned off my phone. Charles ditched me for Betty. I felt it was normal for him to do that. Even though I was his wife, I felt he didn't care about me. Maybe he never compared me with Betty. Maybe I was nothing to him. At 9:30, Charles finally came back. He sat next to me and asked about my dinner for once.
What did you eat?
I didn't answer but asked him softly, "Did you cancel tonight because of Betty?" He froze, surprised and angry.
Who told you that?
I shook my head. No one. I saw it on a video. He sighed softly.
I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be paranoid. And don't worry, there's nothing between her and me. I just donated to her school anonymously. I don't know who leaked it. She brought the TV station to thank me. She was hurrying, so I agreed to do some interviews.
He sat down next to me.
We met at the company cafe. Many staff were there. Honey,
He stroked my hair.
we've been married for 5 years. We trust each other, right?
Uh-huh.
I think I'll have time tomorrow. Let's go to that Cantonese restaurant.
Charles, I interrupted him. I don't like Cantonese food. I only said that because you like it, and I wanted to eat with you more. He froze. Do you know what kind of food I love? He didn't say anything. Of course, he didn't know, nor did he ever care. I couldn't hold back the emotions I had suppressed for hours. I wanted to scream at him, but I still asked him the cruel question. So, you remember that Betty loves black tea and kosher food, but you don't know what your wife loves?
Honey, we can talk about whatever you're unhappy with me, but don't involve Betty in this.
As expected, he couldn't stand one sentence from me. I took a deep breath and looked at him. Tonight, I do have something to talk to you about. Charles, let's get a divorce. Silence filled the air for a minute. Charles said, leaning back,
Danny, do you know what you're saying?
I do.
Divorce is not something you can just bring up.
I know. The silence returned. Charles rubbed his eyebrows in the middle of the morning, his voice helpless.
Maybe I didn't sound too good earlier, but I just met with Betty, and you want to divorce me over that?
I bit my lip, feeling he missed the point.
If I wanted to cheat, I wouldn't have done it this way. You know how I do things. We've been married for 5 years. You should understand.
Yes, I do understand him. He always does things perfectly, and he always plans things carefully to ensure success. But does he understand me? Has he ever loved me? After seeing the video tonight, I felt the same inferiority I felt when I faced Betty as a student. And the truth is clear. He will never see me when Betty is around. But it's ridiculous to dwell on love or lack of love as an adult. We're incompatible after so many years of marriage, and you deserve a better choice.
Where are we incompatible?
He laughed bitterly and reached for me.
You've been doing fine for 5 years.
But I don't want to keep doing it. I dodged his hand and moved away. His hand hung in the air. I've already prepared the divorce papers.
Dagny,
He cut me off.
I explained about Betty, and I promised you I won't see her again. What else do you want?
He said sternly.
If you're going to make a fuss about what happened tonight, then that's unreasonable.
He silenced my words. Fine. It seemed we couldn't talk anymore tonight. He waited a while, then softened his tone and caressed my hair.
Don't be rash, okay?
Then he got up and went to take a shower. I watched his back and whispered, I had clam chowder tonight. He stopped walking. That is my favourite dish. Divorce? What are you saying? My brother David's eyes bulged when he saw the divorce papers in my hand the next day. I should tell him first, since our marriage had strengthened the cooperation between our families. He may have married you reluctantly, but I thought you two were happy. Charles treated you well? He swung a golf club as he spoke. What do you mean, reluctantly? Brother? Well, he sighed, regretting his slip of the tongue. Charles needed a lot of money 5 years ago. I knew you liked him and followed him everywhere, so I hinted to him. I stared at him in disbelief. What did you hint? He shifted uneasily. That, if we became relatives, I would help him with the funds. I felt numb. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Sister? He looked at me anxiously. And? I clenched my fists. What else don't I know? He hesitated. Brother, I'm divorcing him. What are you hiding from me? It's nothing big, just that on your wedding day, Charles's ex-girlfriend came. Here. I froze and looked at him. She wanted to see Charles, but I didn't want any trouble, so I told her you two were madly in love and Charles wouldn't want to see her. I sent her away." He touched his head. "There were some of Charles's relatives there too, so I'm unsure if he knew about this or not. So that's how it was. That's why he asked me to marry him. I thought he proposed because he had some feelings for me. But this marriage was a humiliation he endured for his company and Charles's family. That's what he meant by that snowy night 5 years ago. Danny, do you like me that much? So much that you forced me into this marriage? So he married me but kept a distance between us. He never let me cross the line. When we first married, I constantly texted him asking when he would come home, if he wanted to go out on weekends, and sharing everything in my life with him. But he rarely replied, and only let his secretary contact me if something happened. Slowly, I stopped talking so much, and stopped bothering him. Even the primary contact became his secretary. We had an everyday married life, and he would whisper, "honey," in my ear repeatedly. I always thought that was a proof of our love. But whenever I mentioned having a child, he never agreed. He always took precautions carefully. Now I realize he never wanted to have children with me. After all, I was only his wife. That's all. Last night he asked me, he promised to cut ties with Betty. What else did I want? Yeah, they could have gotten back together on our wedding day. Because of me, they missed their chance again, maybe forever. What more do I, the culprit, want? But that's not what I wanted when I first liked him. I envied her when he was with Betty, but never wanted to be the third wheel or break them up. I liked him because I wanted him to be happy, but he punished me like this for 5 long years. I wandered on the street, but somehow ended up at company. With the divorce papers in my bag, I decided to text his secretary and tell him I wanted to see Charles. I wanted to end this marriage. I didn't want to drag it any longer. I went to the lobby on the first floor, but I saw Betty instead. She was smiling and chatting with the receptionist when she heard me and turned around. She looked thinner and darker than in the video and wore a simple shirt and jeans. Still, she radiated confidence, maturity, and stability. "Long time no sees." She nodded at me. I followed her to the cafe on the first floor. I didn't expect to find the same custode and black chai here that I used to drink at the school cafe. I miss those days. She raised her eyebrows. It was so nice when we were students. She started to tell me about her life in the past few years. She was amazing. She became a rural teacher and helped many children who dropped out of school. Now that the school was running well, she was famous. "You're incredible." I admired her sincerely. She smiled. "People only see the bright side. I almost gave up many times." She took a sip of coffee. "I came to see Charles on your wedding day." My hands turned cold. I broke up with him because I thought I was loved and I was reckless and selfish. I hurt him. But when I returned to be a rural teacher, I realized how hard it was to bridge the gap between ideal and reality. Many things were much more complicated than I thought. I wanted to quit everything and return to him often. But then I heard you were getting married. "I'm sorry," I spoke. She was stunned. "I didn't know you were here that day." She looked down and didn't say anything. "I'm divorcing Charles." I looked at her. Betty's eyes widened in shock. "Don't be silly." She laughed suddenly. "I've seen you in the media many times. Everyone praises you as the perfect wife." "It's true." "Can I ask you something?" She whispered in the daylight. "Why do you want to divorce?" I shook my head. "Why? Because I was tired. I also wanted someone who would love me and let me be reckless and selfish." At that exact moment, a hauntingly familiar voice spiraled through the din of the cafe. "Danny!" Both Betty and I spun around in unison. It was Charles striding toward us with a steadfast determination that was only marred by the flicker of confusion that sparked in his eyes as he spotted Betty. He fixed me with a questioning look and asked, "What brings you unexpectedly to the company?" The subtext behind his words unraveled itself quickly enough. He believed I was there to confront Betty. Betty snatched the reins of the situation gracefully. "Charles, I apologize for the sudden intrusion. Several non-profit educational projects are underway, including the one I spoke to you about. I had some unexpected free time today and thought to use it to further our discussion. All right, my secretary will guide you upstairs. At his behest, his secretary flamboyantly whisked Betty away, leaving Charles and me locked in unexpected solitude. His blatant favoritism was bewildering. Was this his twisted way of staging a feud between Betty and me and making himself the hero? As surreptitious glances and hushed whispers began to puncture our isolated bubble, I finally realized the true nature of Charles's actions. He preemptively diffused rumors that could taint Betty's reputation by displacing her from the scene. This display of seemingly selfless heroism appeared misplaced, given a divorce was hovering over the horizon. However, the implications of these theatrics were recovered on me. The smoother I could navigate this situation, the better for the impending divorce talks. I put on my best diplomatic smile and consoled him. "I'm fine, Charles. You and Betty must discuss important matters, so please go ahead. I'll excuse myself first." But my retreat was swiftly thwarted by Charles, who seemed entangled in his theatrics. He insisted that I looked unwell and declared his intent to escort me to the hospital. Swept under his assertive guidance, I couldn't help but feel at a loss. Was this feeble attempt at chivalry merely to ensure a smooth exit, or was he genuinely concerned? A quick examination confirmed that I was hypoglycemic, something I had lived with for years. Despite my assurances that I always kept sugar on hand, Charles pelted the doctor with endless questions about my condition. This sudden interest perplexed me. Was this some manifestation of his belated concern? As we exited the hospital, locked in an uncomfortable silence, the day's chaotic carousel was still spinning in my head. As the car rested at a red signal, Charles broke the silence with an unexpected question.
Why haven't you ever mentioned this to me?
His query took me aback. Did he genuinely expect me to have confided in him about my condition? Once we were home, the all-encompassing silence still loomed, omnipresent. Seizing the opportunity, I presented Charles with the pre-prepared divorce agreement, hoping he'd come forward with revisions if needed. As he skimmed through the pages, his face transformed into a mask of icy defiance, and he pushed the agreement away, declaring,
I disagree.
I was prepared to oblige, assuming he might object to specific clauses. But his declaration left me utterly dumbfounded.
I disagree with the divorce.
His rejection couldn't have been more apparent. Why? My question echoed in the silent room. Suddenly, a painful realization began to dawn upon me. To Charles, I had been a perfect socialite wife, someone who helped him portray the ideal image he desired. The notion of love was lost in the static. I ended our painful silence with a bitter laugh. Do you even know who you love, Charles? Because it's certainly not me. The truth in my words echoed painfully, but it had needed to be said. His theatrics, manipulations, and blatant disregard for my feelings affirmed one thing. His concern for me wasn't born out of love, but conscious necessity. Under the first blush of dawn, I bid farewell to the home that held memories of my failed marriage. I was returning to my prenuptial haven, an apartment I'd kept wisely. The haunting silence of the previous night lingered, shrouding the air with a rising sense of finality. Charles had disappeared hastily after taking an unexpected call. The irony wasn't lost on me. My wedding ring, the only tangible proof of our 5-year union, was now abandoned on the bedside table. Charles didn't return that night, suggesting an implicit acceptance of our impending divorce. The only casualty of this fallout, an expedient marital arrangement. The curveball came as Charles texted that evening.
I'll pick you up for tonight's party.
He took over the usual corporate communication, breaking the norm. I declared in my response my decision to move out and attend the party solo. His silence revealed the gravity of our situation. Just as I was beginning to adjust to this newfound silence, an unexpected visitor appeared. Charles. His appearance, so alien in its weariness and reddened eyes, surprised me. I saw a vulnerability that I hadn't seen before. Noticing my bare finger spurred a passionate discussion about our impending divorce. Amid my confusion regarding his sudden resistance, he made his stance clear.
Danny, I don't want a divorce.
There it was, Charles's stand. He didn't want a divorce, which left me grappling with a whirlwind of unexpected emotions. Amidst our abruptly interrupted conversation, I tagged him for the party. I was surprised to find the back seat of his car filled with pink gift bags and, much to my astonishment, stocked sugar in the glove compartment, catering to my hypoglycemic needs. I hesitated at the efforts he started making to accommodate my preferences. As if his sudden attentiveness wasn't shocking enough, he promised to compromise, to adjust, share meals, respect my social boundaries, and confirm a united front in case of misunderstandings. His voluntary disclosure of the ongoing scandals involving a confident Betty and his reassurance of her insignificance in our lives left me reeling.
Dagny,
He prayed, coming clean about his self-realization following a night of deep introspection. He confessed his failures as a husband and requested a chance to mend our damaged relationship. Caught in a fog of confusion, I found myself navigating the party. After trading obligatory pleasantries, I sought refuge in the balcony's open air. I unexpectedly bumped into an old friend, Alan. "My eyes do not deceive, Dagny," he greeted with a mischievous grin. Our casual banter and his cigarette offer led to fond recollections and lightened my heart. His jobless status gave me an idea. Knowing well his design talent, I suggested he join my budding business venture. His surprise was evident. "Dagny? A working woman?" And despite his teasing demeanour, there was a hint of consideration as I showed him my business profile. I followed suit as his gaze leisurely drifted towards the entrance, only to find Charles standing there. Charles transformed this encounter. Suddenly, he inundated me with thoughtful gifts, delectable treats, exquisite bouquets, homemade meals, and personal visits. Unaware of our impending split, the new entrants in our company marvelled at my devoted husband. Alan, now a part of the business, had a knowing, amused smile whenever a delivery from Charles arrived. Fast forward to a month later. We buried ourselves in work as our company hustled on a critical bid proposal. Sleep was a stranger for days as we thumbed through itinerary details, shouldering the weight of the forthcoming deal. At the project's conclusion, tension melted away, and laughter bubbled inside me, somehow delighted with Alan's uncharacteristic earnestness. Sharing my laughter, Alan questioned, "What's so funny?" Barely controlling my giggles, I teased, "I just realised I have discovered hidden treasure." Alan chuckled. "I suppose you're lucky to have had my assistance." Caught in his infectious charm, I conceded, "Yes, you're right." Remembering the late hour, I offered, "It's gotten quite late. Care to join me for a late-night meal?" Answering affirmatively, he paused before saying, "But isn't someone picking you up tonight?" Pointing at the entrance, Alan added, "See, I told you so." Turning around, I found Charles in the doorway. Alan collected his belongings nonchalantly, waved me a casual goodbye, and casually added, "Remember, you owe me a meal." "Of course," I assured him as he departed. Left alone with Charles, the office seemed eerily quiet. He moved closer, a thermos cradled in his hands.
have you eaten yet?
Charles questioned, his voice barely above a whisper. I answered affirmatively. An awkward silence filled the room, stretching endlessly. Just as I was going to speak, I found myself suddenly enveloped in Charles's arms. I tensed, taken aback. Charles mumbled into my hair.
Dagny, I'm jealous."
A soft, choked confession that reverberated in the quiet of the office. Never in my wildest dreams did I envision a day when Charles would hold me close, confessing his fit of jealousy.
"You once asked me why I was against divorce."
He started. His voice was laced with an intensity that took me by surprise.
"Do you want to know why? It's because I cannot bear the thought of you being with someone else."
He looked away.
Imagine standing at the entrance, watching your radiant laugh shared with another man. The sting of jealousy threatened to engulf me. I knew deep down that there was nothing between you and Alan, yet I found myself consumed by envy.
His voice trembled. I stood silently, embraced in his arms. "You've also asked me why I desire a divorce, haven't you, Charles?" He drew in a sharp breath. "For the past 5 years, I have been Charles's wife to the world. But in my heart, I realised I had lost my own identity in the process. Charles, I no longer wish to be known as your wife because I yearn to be Dagny again. I want to live a life that is purely my own," I confessed, gently extricating myself from his arms. It's been 5 years, let's part amicably, shall we? His denial was subtle. Shaking his head, the corners of his eyes tinted red. I paused before moving to leave. Suddenly, Charles's hand snatched at mine.
Please consider this.
His plea hung between us.
All I'm asking for is one more chance.
His palm burned against my skin. Fine, I uttered quietly. If by year end you resign as CEO of Tyler, we won't divorce. He stood bewildered.
What?
That's my only condition, I confirmed. Charles didn't utter a word.
Dagny, this demand, it's too harsh.
I shook my head and tried to free my hand, but his grasp remained firm. It's this one condition and no other, I insisted. After what felt like an eternity, he loosened his grip.
I understand,
was all he managed to say. Step down. My brother was taken aback, only to shake his head in disbelief and laughter afterward. Impossible. If Charles ever steps down, I'll unscrew my head and let you play ball with it. I'm aware, I replied evenly. Tyler's family's situation was admittedly rather intricate. The Tyler patriarch had 2 sons, Charles's uncle and Charles's father. Unlike others in the Tyler family, Charles's father was not inclined to business, preferring to indulge his fascination with astrophysics. Initially, the Tyler patriarch intended to bequeath the company to his eldest son's family. However, Charles's 2 older cousins failed to make their mark due to inevitable blunders made 6 years ago. Hence, Charles stepped in. Alas, his cousins, still disgruntled, never ceased their attempts at usurping the CEO position, their ambition ever keen. Whichever way the patriarch leaned, it felt like a choice between his flesh and blood. Charles was more closely intertwined with the patriarch than his cousins because he didn't live on the family estate as a child. Occasionally, the patriarch's judgments faltered due to age. Charles's parents, both scientists, could only help navigate the complex Tyler family politics. Over the past 5 years, the monumental struggle Charles had undertaken to secure his position firmly wasn't lost on anyone, least of all me. Hence, he would never step down. As expected, following my request, Charles didn't approach me again. The months I was sped by in a blur. Immersed in my work, I saw promising progress in the company's operations. Alan and the other employees felt a swell of encouragement. It was evident that Alan had evolved significantly during these challenging times. On December 31st, the company held a modest year-end celebration. We indulged in a feast and sang songs, and my brother joined us. High spirits prevailed during the party. My brother, usually so composed, was the life of the party. As the clock struck 11, we emerged from the KTV bar. Snowflakes began falling gently from the sky, prompting some more exuberant members to initiate a snowball fight in the cold with glee. Across the road, a large screen atop a shopping complex was broadcasting a TV program. My brother was chattering ceaselessly behind me. A snowflake landed on my eyelashes, and when I looked up after brushing it away, I spotted Charles on the big screen. There he was, as handsome and poised as ever, responding to a journalist's question. May I ask the unique reasons behind your sudden resignation as CEO of Tyler? Charles offered a calm smile.
No peculiar reasons. I wish to take some time off, to spend time with my wife.
I watched, amazed, in front of the screen. My glance migrated to my brother, who shared a similar bewilderment. Upon catching my eye, he silently touched his throat. Just then, my cell phone rang. Hello?
Where are you?
Came the smooth and warm voice from the other end. Downtown at the clock tower.
I'll be there in half an hour.
Charles?
Dagny, a promise is a promise.
His voice bore an unprecedented determination.
Wait for me.
At 11:45, I encountered Charles under the clock tower. Emerging through the snowfall, snowflakes settled upon his shoulders and hair, blurred his features in a dreamlike haze. Was this necessary? I asked quietly, keeping my gaze low once we stood facing each other. You've resigned now. What if you can't return? He shakes his head and offers a light-hearted chuckle.
If I can't return, then so be it.
I turned away. All the effort of 5 years just dismissed so easily. Such capricious behavior. His eyes softened into a slight smile.
That means you've been worrying about me, right?
He advanced a pace closer.
That means I still stand a chance, don't I?
Charles. He extended his hand, passing me a bundle of papers. It was our divorce agreement, I was caught off guard. Questions muddled my mind as I stared at him.
These past 3 months, amidst the resignation process, I pondered quite a bit.
He began.
Danny, I did resign, but I don't wish to coerce you into staying in this marriage.
He paused briefly.
As for the divorce agreement, I have already signed it.
That being said, why did you resign then? Now I was utterly confounded.
A savvy businessman never indulges in loss-making deals.
He chuckled.
I'd like to trade my resignation for something else. Is that acceptable?
Trade for something else? I looked at him, perplexed. He reached out, brushing away the snowflakes nestled in my hair.
I'd like to trade it for a chance to start over.
His gaze met mine, and I looked up at him. His eyes were filled with a warmth and tenderness I'd never seen before.
A chance for me to woo you once again.
At precisely 1 minute to midnight, my signature fell onto the agreement paper. From then on, I was no longer the Charles's perfect wife, as people would say. I was simply Danny, my person. As the clock tower heralded the arrival of the new year, Charles and I beheld the snow flung across the vast sky. A new year.
Indeed.
His eyes sparkling as he extended his hand to me.
Happy New Year, Dagny. I am Charles.
He continued. I took a discerning look at him and broke into a smile. Happy New Year, Charles. Returning his gesture, I reached out my hand. I am Danny.